Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name's Mo. I'm an educational technologist here at City. Just wanted to ask, actually, do we have anyone here from City? So, one person here. But a couple of other people from HE, I think, from the HE sector. Are there a few people from industry as well, from outside the HE sector, I think? Hopefully? Okay. Well, what I'd like to talk to you about this afternoon, hopefully discuss with you, is some of the work which I've come across, people and projects that I've come across here as an educational technologist. And the work is really about helping academic staff and professional staff here at the university to embed educational technologies into their teaching and their courses. And a large part of it is about, quite low-level work to get people using in educational technologies to quite minimum standards. Some of it is about helping people to innovate and branch out a little bit. And if you're really lucky, some of it is actually about discovering all the innovative and exciting things that people are already doing. I'm not really giving a case study or a particularly detailed description of particular uses of creativity and in curricula here, but it's about some of the issues and challenges which come up occasionally and which are quite interesting to think about. And Hazel, who was here and giving the last presentation, would have found, I think, quite a few parallels with what she was just talking about. But anyway, so it's really about thinking about how, particularly how does use of Web 2 or social media technologies, social software technologies, enable and foster creativity in the curriculum here at City. And what challenges does that pose for us? So, of course, I'm not arguing that there's anything particularly sort of innovative or creative per se about social software and social media, Web 2, within teaching and learning. But the use of things like this are not by no means particularly widespread throughout the whole sector, certainly not here within City. So what are some of the barriers to use of these types of technologies within HE? Well, there are... I'm so sorry, higher education. Okay, beg your pardon. So within higher education, what are some of the barriers to uses of things like Web 2, social media, social software? Well, it's partly to do with uneasiness about openness, putting things out there online for everybody to see, sometimes among academic staff. Sometimes it's about technical competence using such tools, or perceptions of how difficult they're going to be and they're all going to be going wrong all the time. Perception that students are going to know more about the things being taught or being used than teachers would. There are, again, risks or perceptions of risks around copyright, breaching copyright, authorship, plagiarism. If students are blogging, reblogging, retweeting, so on, how do we know it's actually their work, or is it just somebody else's work that they're passing off as their own? And it kind of taps into more traditional ways of thinking about the sort of assessment that students do. There's a long-running argument that using social media tools or Web 2 tools just move too fast. Why should I invest all of my time and energy into creating assessments that rely on students using social media if I don't even know if those social media tools are going to be around in a few years, and so on? And related to the last point as well, there are whole conflicts and tensions within higher education about the amount of time and resources and incentives that academic staff have to put into their teaching versus their research. On the other hand, what are the potentials? What's the advantages of integrating such tools into teaching and learning in higher education? And these are, again, really clear. It's about reducing the distance between the teacher and the learner, making learning more about real life, applying it to real-world situations, focusing on the process of learning as well as just a list of topics and subjects to be learnt and processed. Giving students chances to work together, work on real tasks, real projects, anytime, anywhere learning, and moving beyond simply knowledge and learning within academic topics and moving it out, extending it into the real world assessing and fostering the growth of more skills, more attributes in individual students. So, I've already said this is not really a case study or particular discussions of real examples, and I don't want to give too much of a list because I'll miss something out, and there are many more examples than just these. But many examples here at City of how such things are being integrated into curricula. So it's things like students using blogs, which happens a lot on many of our programs, wikis, students creating magazines online and in print, self-publishing, and using institutionally provided tools. Creating radio programs, recording and presenting their own radio shows, their own TV documentaries, news bulletins and so on within some of our more practice-based courses. And then, creating and publishing and even remixing, multimedia into their assessments in a wide range of subject areas. So, creating online artifacts and submitting portfolios in online journalism, creating Flickr portfolios, promoting live music events, and actually the promotional work that goes into those within social media, and creating multimedia portfolios to showcase language skills, speaking and writing skills in foreign languages. Many more examples which you'll find around the rest of the university as well. And this, doesn't even begin to go into all of the kinds of tools and programs which students use of their own accord for their personal study, and to work together in groups on projects which they're set outside of their formal assessed work. So, the kind of tools which we hear about them using, you'll be very familiar with, and probably put many staff here to shame. But things like Facebook and Google Hangouts and Trello and Evernote and so on, and many more, perhaps more up-to-date systems as well. So, how is students' creativity fostered by the chance to use all of these different technologies? Well, many of the same points, really. It's all about getting the chances to work together, again, working on projects which in many ways mirror the kind of work that they'll hopefully be doing in their professional careers. Sharing information and skills, tapping into professional and creative networks through LinkedIn and so forth. Fostering social capital among students, so beginning to build up a reputation, a profile online, which they can then take forward when looking for work and looking to meet other like-minded people. And it can encourage what's in teaching and learning literature known as learner-centeredness as opposed to teacher-centeredness. The idea that students can direct their own learning, that they can find things that they want to work on themselves, that they can define their own learning objectives. And it's not about somebody standing up here transmitting information to them which they duly write down and regurgitate to me in an essay, but about them getting the chance to work together or even work alone and produce something which they want to produce and which they can define as they see useful and enlightening for them. So, yeah, linking academic work to the real world. But what I want to move on to think about a little bit more is what challenges does this kind of pose to the kind of internal workings of the university? Okay, so this all sounds great so far, and indeed it is all great, of course. I suppose one other side which needs to be thought about in all of this is how does it all link in to the way that the university works and assessment works? And some of this is going to be how it's sort of traditionally worked, not necessarily how it has to work in the future, but also about how the administrative and regulatory processes of higher education, how much room is there, how much give is there in those for the use of more sort of creative or open technologies. So, of course, again, this is the idea again that academics are no longer fully in control of what students are doing and learning. maybe this is a little bit of a fallacy, because in many senses you don't need to introduce technology for that to happen, but the perception, at least, that by allowing students to go off and use blogs or social media or whatever else they want to use to create artifacts which are going to be assessed, that somehow they're stepping out from what the academics are controlling, and that some control is being lost over that. Then there's all the issues around technical knowledge and support. So who's going to support students using these technologies if and when they go wrong, let's say. All right. Then there's the systems themselves, the services. How are they reliable? Will they continue to function in the same way in the next 2 or 3 years? Will they stay free? We had an example of one of our courses using Delicious as part of a piece of assessment, and students were required to collate a portfolio, a collection of links within Delicious. Then, of course, I think there was the news that Yahoo bought Delicious, and that it was going to be sunsetted, apparently. So there's a whole panic. Oh, okay. So there's many other bookmarking services out there, but this particular program had grown to rely on Delicious. I think in the end it's still going, isn't it? But of course, there's no control over that service in the way that there would be if it was an in-house service or something that we controlled or in some way owned. And then there's a whole literature around what's sometimes called technology-enhanced learning within higher education, or e-learning, to do with the idea that if particular technologies, particular approaches to use of educational technologies are going to be introduced into a course, that they need to be brought in a really kind of holistic way, that it's not enough to simply tack on the use of, say, a blog, or require students to start using Twitter, or to get them doing something other than the usual essays and presentations. But that this needs to be actually explicitly designed into the course from the bottom up. And that, of course, introduces a whole new level of extra work and reconsiderations that need to be made in order for these changes to stick, and for them to actually, for these technologies to be used in a way which students and staff are going to actually see the benefits of, and which is actually going to enhance students' learning. So, there's actually also a whole set of challenges specifically to do with assessment within higher education, which the use of what I've called Web 2, or social media, social software, can impact upon. So this is things like the fact that, generally speaking, assessed work needs to be kept by the university for X number of years after it's been submitted. Then the fact that frequently it's advantageous to keep it private, or sometimes it's even confidential. Issues around the fact that work often needs to be double marked by 2 separate people independently, and then sent off to external examiners to be moderated. There are the issue of deadlines. Okay, if you have suddenly students writing blogs or submitting videos online as part of their assessment, how do you manage deadlines with that? And indeed, how do you stop students from merely simply deleting the blog, for example, after the deadline's passed? And then an issue which I discovered in quite a few years ago in an interview with a member of staff who teaches e-journalism, online journalism, and made the point that it's a central part of his course is for students to use Facebook, Twitter, and so on. Well, there are students out there there are individuals out there who don't want to have a Facebook account. They don't want to be on Twitter. How do those students adequately engage with that particular course? Well, I suppose the flippant answer to that question would be, why are you doing that course in the first place? But it's not enough to simply say, oh, well, if you don't want to set up a Facebook account, don't do this course. There's a kind of conflict there, which I'm not saying I've got the answer to, but something about requiring students to create and use social media accounts, and how we manage the expectations of them to do that, and how they will be able to fulfill aspects of certain programs if they're not keen on doing so. Okay, so against this background, here at City, we've introduced a number of institutionally owned systems which go some way towards trying to mitigate some of these challenges. And the decision to invest in several of these programs systems was prompted by the fact that we did have students, or in fact still do have students, working on their own privately set up blogs for assessment, submitting Vimeo links, as assessment, and so on. And I guess some of the advantages of using in-house systems as opposed to our external systems are pretty clear. In theory, we have control over storage and backups and when upgrades are performed and so on. Again, in theory, we have clearer boundaries about what needs to be supported and what doesn't need supported. Although even that, there's question marks over that. We have a WordPress installation via a company called EduBlogs. Now, at what point do so we support that, but then there are X number of plugins out there that can be installed on a WordPress blog. There are X number of plugins out there that EduBlogs haven't improved yet, but can still be used in a WordPress blog. Do we support all of those? It still becomes a little bit fuzzy. But in theory, we have clearer boundaries over what technical support can and should be given. And we've got potential to integrate them into all of our other systems like the virtual learning environment, Moodle, which we use here, and potential for single sign-on, so it's much easier for students to access all of these systems and for them all to be linked together within one overall structure. But of course, they will never be as dynamic, as wide-ranging, as exciting perhaps as many of the other social media Web 2 tools that are out there. But actually, I should explain what these are. We have EduBlogs. We have an open source video platform called Kaltura, which allows students to submit multimedia video and audio files as part of their assessment and to create a kind of online portfolio where they can collect and share video and audio artifacts. We've got a web conferencing system which students can use to hold online meetings and which staff can use to give online lectures and Q&A sessions, and so on. And we've seen, in fact, some very ingenious ways that people can use these systems to overcome some of the issues which we've just talked about. So things like giving students access to an institutionally provided blog and then either enrolling them all on the same blog, giving them each their own individual blog, giving them a set deadline, allowing them to work on their posts or the individual post up until a deadline, and then bulk demoting them all to subscribers or to removing their editing access to the blog so that they're actually not able to work on it after a deadline has passed, which of course if they were simply setting up their own blogs we wouldn't be able to do. Similarly, the ability for students to upload videos and audio recordings into their Kaltura account, which remain totally private to them and to the person marking the work. And then the ability, I suppose kind of the opposite example, the ability to then share individual pieces of work within Moodle so that other students can see examples of good work. Okay, so kind of beginning to wrap up really, the challenge for, some of the challenges which arise for people like me in the sort of work which we do. Having talked to students, academics, on what we might consider, some of the more creative courses in areas like music, journalism, creative industries, and so on, the thing which strikes me is that the novelty of it is kind of lost on them. They wouldn't expect anything else. In fact, they're just here to do that kind of thing. They don't see it as creative or innovative. They're just learning the tools of the trade. So there's not really any sense there that what they're doing is out of the ordinary at all. They just expect nothing less. In other disciplines, I guess that was partly what I think the parallel with Hazel's presentation slightly arises. But in other disciplines, perhaps still, to an extent, grappling with more generally how they think about technology-enhanced learning sometimes, not really thinking too much at this point about social media or Web 2 tools. The other thing which is quite interesting is there's actually resistance among staff and students to the idea of institutionally provided systems at all. So in some areas, again, like online journalism, for instance, the idea that actually it's not just about what they put in the blog, it's not just the posts that they write and contribute, it's they see the choice and the creation of the blog itself as in some sense a part of the assessed work. And the idea that if we dish out students an account on this system, that's going to make things easier and simpler, is actually rejected to an extent. And then I think also, the whole idea of embedding the use of such systems into more programs and more disciplines, I guess relates back to the very nature of a place like this and the nature of the programs which are delivered here, very modular, so often not a very holistic sense of a program as a whole, but existence of discrete modules and program units within a course or a program. And again, within the more creative courses, the kind of prevalence of the predominance of part-time lecturers who are practitioners primarily, and then academics or teachers secondarily. So again, not necessarily investing all of their time and effort into their teaching practices, and perhaps not necessarily fully dialed into the kind of systems and access to systems which exist, and wouldn't necessarily think of asking whether there is an institutionally provided video platform or a blogging system and so on, and would actually just presume from the start of the need to ask students to set up their own sites. So a quick tour through, I guess, some of the conflicts and challenges which exist there about the use of Web 2 and social media tools within assessment in higher education. Some references. And I actually have some questions for you, unless anyone wants to ask any other questions. But really, it's I think we have the full spectrum of humanity here. We have people from HE and people not from HE. So we have, if you're from the university sector, what's your experience of integrating the use of Web 2 tools into assessment practices? And if you're from industry, if you're a practitioner, what impact do you think this has or doesn't have on the employability, the skills of graduates when they leave the university? So thanks very much for listening.